Jeff as our guest here. It actually kind of fits with this conversation a little bit, but you had come across some interesting stuff on the hybrid workplace.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really great stuff. I mean, again, we were talking a little bit before we turned the cameras on. Everybody's talking about what does the return look like. Some firms have already returned. Some firms, you're reading about giving up 40% of their physical space, some 25%. Some people did a lot of restructuring, shall we say, during COVID. I find it amazing that even a year after COVID, that people are willing to predict what their clients are going to want in the post-COVID world. Here in the United States, you got Pennsylvania and some other states now lifting mask requirements and so on. But I just don't know how you can. I mean, we're still, as a firm, we're looking at what do our clients want us to be able to do? What do we need to be able to do to adapt to the way they're going to be adapting going forward in whatever that hybrid model is? And I think it's a safe prediction to say that, I'm going to be working from home part of the time, that a lot of my meetings will be video conference based, that our clients are going to request and require that in part as cost savings, less travel, the whole 9 yards associated with that. But to be able to say that, all those different pieces and parts about, I mean, from a bar requirements and websites, some, I think it's Florida bar, there's a couple of bars that are fairly restrictive on that. If you have to list all your offices, does that mean now that if I've got 300 lawyers working from home, I now list 325 offices as part of that? How do I enforce clean desk policies? I answer security questionnaires from our clients on a regular basis, that I have to answer specific physical and other security issues for our 10 offices. How do you answer that when you're now talking about there's no key card on your front door, there's no electronic locks or anything else, there's no video cameras. Well, actually, there may be.
Actually, there are lots of them.
Video doorbell, yeah. So scratch that one, but that whole thing on who do you bring back? Do you bring them back for particular? And that's what caught me in that one article was task-based, right? We all want to be back together. Some tasks we do much better alone in our home office. Other tasks we can't do as well. We do better in a group, collaborating and so on. So, figuring out how you get those schedules all to combine in terms of people in the office or people working from home, I just thought was a fascinating idea, given that some firms seem to have set their direction already so very, very clearly.
Yeah. So today I had a chance to hear from Timothy Bowers, who's a managing partner at VLP Law Group, which has been virtual since 2008, I think. And I think many of you have covered the firm, and it was really interesting because they haven't had too much of a change, if at all, during the pandemic, and they have a distributed fully remote workforce. But one of the things he said struck me as I was reading through these articles, Jeffrey, is that to make these work, you have to have a really deliberate plan. Culture has to be, even in an in-person environment, culture has to be pretty deliberate if you want a strong workplace culture. And especially with distributed or remote workforce, it needs to be deliberate. And so far, I haven't really seen much of that, especially during the pandemic. Everybody was scrambling. And so that made perfect sense. But now, as you're coming up with plans and giving up office space, how deliberate are these firms in how they're approaching these hybrid teams? So it'll be interesting. And I just posted something about it. I'm expecting some great successes with people who are really planning and working hard at this, and then some spectacular fails. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
I think it's a bit like, I think we discussed at one point the notion of a hybrid conference. And, it's very easy to do an all virtual conference. It's pretty easy to do an all in-person conference. But when you try to mix the two, you get a lot of practical problems. And I think we're going to see the same thing when it comes to remote work. You know, an all virtual firm, they've been doing it a long time. They know how it works. They know what to do. Once you shift and you have half the people in the office and half the people at home, and since there's no real deliberate thinking about training or equal opportunity for mentors and mentorship, assignments and all that sort of thing, things that many law firms are frankly not terribly good at.
Right, exactly, Steve. They were already struggling, and now, now that they've kind of stopped in their tracks almost with summer programs and advancement, and good training programs, and even the VLP. What I was talking about was they don't hire junior lawyers, so they're counting on the firms to do this training. So if it's not happening, who's doing it?
Yeah, and training it's always kind of interesting, because the big argument is, well, so much of the training happens informally at the at the coffee stand, a coffee pot, or bumping into each other in a hall. And I mean, frankly, that's a terrible way to train. If that's our training program as a profession, that means I may happen to bump into the really smart lawyer and get good training, and Bob may dump into the not so smart and get terrible training, and that's what has happened in a lot of law firms. I mean, honestly, very few firms sit down and say, what does it mean to be a good lawyer, and let's train to that, which is what we'd have to do in a hybrid kind of situation.
I keep wondering, I think I've made this point before, but I keep wondering in these hybrid firms of the present and or future, whether we end up with a class system within the firm of lawyers and higher level professionals and others for whom the hybrid system is not so amenable. It's kind of easier for a lawyer to say, I'm going to stay home and work on the brief today, and I've got meetings with clients in the office tomorrow. But I think a lot of the support staff and even some of the allied professionals in firms may not, the firms may not give them as much flexibility around working from home or working in the office over the long term. So I think that's, and I haven't really seen any articles that kind of address that in any meaningful way. I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen there.
The Littler survey that came out this week sort of alludes to that. They say that there's a real discrepancy between what people are expecting and what firms are planning and delivering. So they said 71% of employers surveyed, and there was a really big number, said that their employees would prefer a hybrid model, but 28% plan to have most of them return full time. So there seems to be, and there was just a whole bunch of, I won't go on about it now, but I can post it, but there's quite a lot of discrepancies between what the expectation of employees are and what employers are actually delivering. And I wonder that people have talked about doing surveys, have talked about engaging with their employees. I wonder to what extent they're actually doing it, because that really seems to be the most sensible thing to make sure that there isn't that kind of breakdown in expectation.
Yeah. Also, just point out, I dropped a link in the chat, this Boston Globe article, totally somewhat unrelated. I mean, it's not about talking about law at all, but just this behavioral psychologist wrote this interesting article on why the hybrid workplace won't last over the long term for psychological reasons more than anything else. I thought that was interesting.
That was a good article, and it's like the rest of you, you kind of watch all the chatter that goes on, and for a long time the chatter seemed to be remote is great, we'll never go back, this is going to change the world, and now the chatter seems to be we're going back soon. And what was the one firm that said we strongly encourage that you return to the office, but you don't have to, but you're strongly encouraged. So I wonder whether a year from now we'll be sitting here with most people back in the office, but we'll see. That plus the fact that everybody wants to get together with people again, which is also kind of a force that will drive us back to status quo, maybe.
When you have
these rules, sorry.
Yeah.
When you have numbers that kind of self-regulate, so if you've got a billable hour requirement, then that's fairly transparent whether you're in the office, in your home office, or anything else. So your productivity still has a significant measure. If you're talking about allied professionals, I like that term, Bob. that don't have those kinds of requirements. I mean, lots of different firms, some of the Slack groups that I'm part of, talking about, what kind of big brother monitors the firms have to have in place in order to see how productive staff is, the allied professionals are outside of the office. And it's an interesting play because, like I said, the lawyer, the paralegal, those with time requirements, billable hour requirements, all that's self-regulating. It's very obvious whether you're doing the work or not. And in the other instances, not so much.